the fieldwork surveyors of CSDS Lokniti to actually go out, that by itself is a very heroic effort. And so far, nobody really has a full sense of which way the hawa is blowing in Bihar. I think at the end of this broadcast, people will have a sense of the issues, the trends that are emerging and what could happen on counting day.
That's right, because remember, these are face-to-face interviews done by India's leading academic institute on political analysis, CSDS. Let's get you the big headlines that we're going to be looking at. The Bihar polls, days to go for the Bihar battle. Lokniti-CSDS bring you the biggest sentiment tracker. Can Nitish Kumar beat anti-incumbency and become the chief minister for a fifth successive time? What will be the X factors? Stand by for the big revelations from the CSDS Lokniti poll.
Prime Minister's big COVID warning ahead of the festive season, appeals to citizens not to let their guard down, says the lockdown is gone, but the virus has not.
कि लॉकडाउन भले चला गया हो, वायरस नहीं गया है.
The Prime Minister also lauds Corona warriors, confirms the vaccine work is on track, says government is working on a plan to make the vaccine available to every single Indian.
It's Rahul Gandhi versus Kamal Nath over the item insult. After Rahul calls the remark unacceptable, ex-MP CM remains defiant, says it's his personal opinion.
And Punjab becomes the first state to pass a resolution rejecting the 3 Modi government farm laws. Chief Minister Amrinder Singh says he's ready to resign but will not bow down to any form of injustice to the farmer.
Can you just explain the methodology for me?
CSDS Lokniti between the 10th of October and the 17th of October. So it's a very, very contemporary poll when the battle began. 3,500 face-to-face interviews across 37 constituencies, a randomized sample taking gender and caste into account.
We just want to take a moment to explain the difference between our post-poll study done by Access My India and this pre-poll study. This is a multi-stage systematic random sampling where they are going only to 37 assembly constituencies and 148 polling booths. So it's not in every constituency. It gives you a broad sense of the issues which are very rigorously researched, and it tells you about the level of satisfaction, dissatisfaction with the incumbent government. So it's not really going to every single voter. We're not even making that claim, but it will give you a very definite sense of which way the political winds in the state of Bihar are blowing, Rajdeep.
Okay, let's turn to the first big finding of the CSDS Lokniti poll. The first big finding is the anti-incumbency tracker. Remember, Nitish Kumar has been chief minister now with a brief interlude for 15 years now. And what does the tracker show? 2010, 60% were in favor of Nitish. By 2015, it came down to 52%. Today, the pre-poll survey puts Nitish down to 38%. So from 60 to 38%. Against Nitish, 2010 was 30%. Remember, that's when BJP, JDU had swept Bihar. It comes up in 2015 to 42%. Remember, this was the poll where Nitish fought with Lalu Prasad. So the politics of Bihar has completely changed. And now in 2020, our pre-poll says 43% is what we are saying are against Nitish. With that, we also asked, what are the issues? What are the key issues in this Bihar election? And this is what the poll suggests. In 2015, the pre-poll said development was 31%. Again, remember, this was the poll that Nitish fought with Lalu Prasad. They are now rivals once again. 2020, that number comes down to 29%. Unemployment, and remember, Berozgari has become a big issue this time in Bihar. 9% in 2015, this time it's up to 20%. Inflation was 16% in 2015, it's down to 11%. Poverty 6% remains the same. Education 2% is up to 7%. The big shift though is in unemployment, and that might explain why some believe that there is this youth anger which Nitish Kumar is going to have to assuage this
From
time.
what we're seeing in this poll, Rajdeep, it's very clear that Nitish Kumar is no longer the Teflon-coated Nitish that he was for the last 15 years. A lot of his sheen, because of the migrant crisis, because of he's been in power for three straight terms, because he's jumped ship from the BJP to the RJD, back to the BJP. This is a man who, in the eyes of his voters, where he's been loved for a decade and a half, has lost some of that sheen. That's very clear, Rajdeep.
That's right. Also remember, Rahul, that Nitish Kumar is now the longest serving chief minister of any North Indian state.
Sure.
I mean, 15 years with just one small gap when Jitin Ram Majhi was chief minister. Nitish Kumar has dominated Bihar politics for a long time. So from February 2005, when he first appeared to scent power, that was a very short-lived government, to today, where he's hoping to win another 5-year term. That's a pretty 15 years of very
At the
long
end of
time.
15 years, Sheila Dikshit was almost toxic in the eyes of the voters of Delhi. They wanted her out.
That's
so
right.
in that sense, if you compared with someone who was once popular like a Sheila Dikshit, Nitish Kumar still maintains some level of popularity. But if you look at the next data set that's coming on your screen right now, and this is to do with who voters want as the next chief minister of the state of Bihar. 31% of the respondents say they want Nitish Kumar as the next chief minister. But look at Tejaswi Yadav. You know, he was dismissed by his critics as being a greenhorn, as being an unwilling politician, as a dinnist who wasn't really going out in the manner that Lalu Yadav did, but he's just 4% away. And if to that 27% we add the 3% residual vote that Lalu Yadav still gets, then the Lalu family is 30% vis-a-vis 31% of Nitish Kumar. Earlier, Rajdeep, Nitish Kumar was heads and shoulders ahead of anybody else in the state of Bihar. The 30-year-old young Tejaswi Yadav is already caught up, and there's only a 4% gap. And if I add Lalu, then that's 30. That's a 1% gap then.
That's right. And if you look at 31%, it clearly suggests that, you know, unlike, say, particularly 10 years ago, when Nitish was the overwhelming choice for chief minister, he now has opposition. Add Lalu, as you said, 27 and 3, that's 30. Add Chirag Paswan, 5%. Remember, he's campaigning on an anti-Nitish plan. Clearly suggests that there is, as we've been saying, not just a residue of anti-incumbency, there's a substantial amount of anti-Nitish feeling on the ground, which the likes of Tejaswi are hoping to capitalize on.
But given how much criticism Tejaswi Yadav has come in for, given the fact that, you know, during COVID and even otherwise, people said, nikalta nahi hai, ghar mein baithta hai, 11 baje tak jag ke nikalta hai. In comparison, the data seems to suggest that Tejaswi Yadav has been able to build himself up in the esteem of the voters of Bihar and has emerged as a successor of Lalu Yadav, at least in the eyes of those who say they'll vote for the Gadbandhan.
With one caveat, Rahul, they have no option. You know, at the moment, there is no other opposition leader who has carried any kind of credibility. So the entire Lalu vote, in a sense, is transferring to Tejaswi. So he can now claim with these numbers that he's emerging as an inheritor of the Lalu vote. But that may not be enough, because that means you are the inheritor of the traditional Muslim Yadav combine of Lalu Prasad, but you may not emerge, you need MY plus, and that may not happen with Tejaswi Yadav.
So we'll come to the vote share and the seat share in a bit, but what we can see right now is that Nitish Kumar's stature is diminished. As Rajdeep says, because there is no one else and Tejaswi is the opposition's chief ministerial face, his popularity seems to be catching up. Let's now introduce the guests joining us on this special broadcast. We've got Sandeep Shastri from Lokniti-CSDS, has worked very closely with the team that's put this poll together. We've got Shwapan Dasgupta, Rajya Sabha Member of Parliament of the BJP. Javed Ansari joins us on this broadcast. Manisha Priyam, academician, researcher, understands the ins and outs of the politics of Bihar. Rajat Sethi joins us, author and political analyst. We've got Rahul Verma, a fellow at the Center for Political Research. We've got Abhishek Jha, who's a JDU leader. And we've got Supriya Srinath from the Congress. Shwapan Dasgupta, I want to come to you first. Your sense of the fact that Nitish Kumar's popularity seems to have come down. You know, unlike earlier, Sandeep Shastri, Nitish Kumar was towering ahead of all opposition leaders in Bihar for the longest time. If you go back in time, you know, from 2010 onwards, if you compare Nitish Kumar versus Lalu Yadav and his family, there used to be a 20% plus gap. And now the gap is only 1%. What does the data seems to suggest about the diminished stature of Nitish Kumar in the eyes of the electorate of Bihar? I'll start with Sandeep Shastri. Sandeep.
Rahul, I fully agree with you that the poll seems to suggest a diminished stature for Nitish ji. But I'd like to add two important caveats which we must. One is that on the data of whether Nitish should get a second chance, you gave the figures. But there is a third figure which we should give in that, which is nearly 20% of the sample is undecided on the question. And that's quite a huge number. 20% have not expressed their opinion, and we need to keep that factor in mind. That is, they could still take a decision on that as you go towards the poll. Undoubtedly, the gap between Tejasvi Yadav and Nitish in terms of people's support on who should be the next chief minister is just 4 percentage points. But if you're adding the 3 percentage points of Lalu to Tejasvi, we should similarly add the 4 percentage points of Sushil Modi to Nitish, because they are in an alliance, and therefore the distance still is 5 percentage points. There is no doubt that the popularity of Nitish seems to have come down as compared to the past. But I think he is still, in some senses, ahead of the others as you look at it before the actual start of the campaign.
You know, we want to show our viewers what is possibly one of the most important insights coming out of this Lokniti-CSDS poll, the perception of voters about the performance of the state government. And I want you to look at the charts very carefully, because we've gone back in this CSDS timeline and looked at how the data has changed over the last 2 assembly elections. In 2010, 77% of the voters in the state of Bihar said that they were satisfied with the first term of Nitish Kumar. In his second term, his popularity went up. 80% of the voters in 2015 said they were happy with the work done by the Nitish Kumar government. That has now come down to 52%. That's a 28% fall between 2015 to now. That is very significant. Look also at the number of people who are claiming to be dissatisfied, which is more than doubled. It was 19% in 2010, 18% in 2015, jumping up now to 44%. The gap between those who are satisfied and dissatisfied has never been narrower. The data speaks for itself. And Rajdeep, in 5 years, 28% of the voters have changed their mind. They've moved from being in the satisfied with Nitish camp to being in the dissatisfied with Nitish camp. That's 1 in 3 voters.
You know, the interesting aspect is what has changed, Rahul, between 2015 and 2020 as far as Nitish is concerned. In 2017, he jumped ship. You know, in 2015, you go into the election with Lalu Prasad. In 2017, you decide to go back to the BJP. So naturally, there is a credibility hit. And the Lalu voter, I think, or the voter of the RJD who voted with Nitish in 2015 has obviously gone back to the Lalu camp with a sense of dissatisfaction. But I wonder whether it's dissatisfaction, anger or fatigue. Manisha Priyam, what do you think it is? Is it dissatisfaction? Is it anger? Is it fatigue with Nitish Kumar that the numbers are steadily coming down when it comes to a sense of satisfaction with his government? Manisha Priyam? Steadily coming down when it comes to a sense of satisfaction. We'll try and... Manisha Priyam, can you hear me?
Hello?
Is it dissatisfaction? Is it fatigue? Is it anger with Nitish? Okay, we'll try and... Javed Ansari, you want to take that? Is it dissatisfaction, anger or fatigue with the Nitish government?
No, there is a definite anti-incumbency.
Okay, we'll try and... Javed Ansari, you want to take that? Is it dissatisfaction, anger or fatigue?
No, there is a definite anti-incumbency.
Javed, do you want to take that?
So in my view, it's a combination of all three. Anger that he's failed to deliver on jobs, anger at the manner in which he dealt with the migrant crisis, anger also at his migratory brand of politics. One day he's with RJD, the next day with BJP, then with RJD, now with the BJP. Who knows after 10th November where he will be? And fatigue because after 15 years, remember the legendary Jyoti Basu, after 3 terms, even people had run out of patience with him in West Bengal. And he had a party apparatus, he had everything. Nitish is in that unique position, or used to be in that unique position, without having outright won the state. He's dominated the politics of Bihar for at least the last 15 years. Every time he's won, he's become chief minister. It's either been with the help of the BJP or the RJD. It's never, JDU has never won on its own steam. And so therefore this is his real test. And unlike the past, or unlike the last election where he did most of the heavy lifting, this time I do believe that if he does become the chief minister, it will be on account of the heavy lifting that the BJP and the Prime Minister particularly will be doing on his behalf.
Rajat Sethi, you want to also step into that? Is there a sense that after there comes a time when there is an element of fatigue? Let's be very clear. At his satisfaction level still outstrips dissatisfaction. 52% satisfied, 44% dissatisfied. But in comparison with the Nitish of 2010, 2015, he seems a much diminished figure.
Connect me on my call number.
Yes, Rajat.
Please connect.
Let's put that question to Shwapan Dasgupta, who's joining us now. Shwapan Dasgupta, the data from the Lokniti-CSDS poll seems to suggest that Nitish Kumar is no longer the Teflon-coated Sushasan Babu that we've seen for the past 15 years. Whether it's the jump to the RJD and the return to the fold of the BJP, or his attitude during the migrant crisis, or just the fact that he's been in the saddle for 15 years and voters have now had enough of him, there is anti-incumbency which can be seen. The level of voters who say they're dissatisfied with Nitish Kumar seems to be going up. It doesn't seem to be a very rosy picture for the 3-time Chief Minister. Shwapan Dasgupta.
Well, I think it's quite clear and it's quite evident that there is a profound degree of anti-incumbency in Bihar. And certainly Nitish Babu's personal popularity ratings have gone down pretty sharply. Now, the reasons for this are complex, but I think one of the reasons which we should look at is the relative failure of the Janata Dal United to actually expand its political base. Now, the Janata Dal United, in a sense, has always been disproportionately dependent on Nitish Kumar's own popularity to get where it is. Unlike both the RJD as well as the BJP, the caste coalition around the JDU has been a bit amorphous. And that, to begin with, has always been a problem with Nitish Kumar. It always used to be said that Nitish Kumar has popularity, but he doesn't have forces on the ground. That it was the BJP which always got them the forces on the ground. And that sort of synergy worked very well in the past. Now, I think what has happened, particularly after the 2019 elections, I think Nitish Kumar, in a sense, has become also very subdued. The sense of there is no aggression which is there. He's become very much of someone who is, he always was a bit of a, what should I say, a person who believed in good governance through the deft use of bureaucracy. And I think that lack of the popular touch is, I think, hurting him a little more. But I think, having said all that, I think it's worth noting that whatever support Nitish Kumar gets today in Bihar, and I don't think it's worth underestimating that. It's due to the fact that he still has a pretty impressive record in terms of governance is concerned. So he makes up for the JDU's own little shortcomings with his own performance in governance. There's a lot of delivery which has happened in Bihar, and I think whatever Nitish Kumar gets the support, it's because of that.
That's an interesting way of looking at Nitish Kumar's politics. The party has not been able to evolve. The party has not moved to the next level, the JDU. Nitish Kumar, on the other hand, obviously is the party. And that's very clear. I don't know if Manisha Priyam is now with us, but we will try and get political reactions. Let's get Abhishek from the JDU. Sir, tell us your sense. Is it right to say that Nitish Kumar at the moment, the problem for him is the Janata Dal United is a one-man show. And when that person gets diminished, the party also suffers. The general feeling is the JDU is no longer driving this alliance. It's the BJP which is driving this alliance forward. Am I correct?
No, I do not agree on this point. Chirag, I would like to make it very clear that the top leadership of BJP and the leadership in Bihar also have mentioned it very clear that the NDA is going to fight the upcoming elections on the face of Mr. Nitish Kumar, and he will be the CM candidate of the NDA. And the next thing is, whatever the data speak, but still Nitish Kumar is the most popular, most acceptable face in Bihar. The voters of Bihar and the public of Bihar still believe that only Nitish Kumar can do the development works in Bihar. No other face is in his competition till now, and we are very sure of the fact that we are going to win the upcoming elections by 3/4 of the majority.
No one is doubting that Nitish Kumar has been chosen as the chief ministerial face by the NDA. That announcement has been made. But the sense, our numbers are clearly suggesting that compared to say 2010 or even 2015, Nitish is a much diminished figure. His popularity is no longer what it was.
See, actually, I do not rely on the data. Let the results come, and you'll get that NDA is going to win the upcoming elections with more than 200 seats. And I was just answering that question in which you mentioned that BJP is driving this alliance. But the main fact is still JDU is driving the alliance, as Nitish Kumar is the face of NDA, and BJP is a very big alliance. And
Sir,
we have other two parties
the fact is that Nitish Kumar is the face, but the chariot, it appears this time, is being driven by the BJP. We can dispute that. You know, that's disputable. But let's look at this. Let's look at who is more popular. And again, Rahul, you know, from 1995 to 2020, the gap, politics has been dominated by Nitish and the Lalu family. Earlier Lalu, now the family. From 1995, Nitish Kumar was at 7% and Lalu Prasad and family were at 23%. Then, of course, Rabri Devi takes over in 1999. Over time, look at how the gap has narrowed, because at his peak in 2010, Nitish Kumar was supported by 53% versus just 28% for Lalu and family. So between originally 1995, it's clear that Lalu Prasad and family well ahead of Nitish. By 2010, if we go in quick 5-year cycles, you find Nitish Kumar taking over. And now in 2020, it's an even heat. So clearly you've got a much closely fought contest in Bihar compared to previous times. I think we finally have Manisha Priyam joining us. You tell us, ma'am, what do you make out of these early numbers that we are giving? Do you believe that Nitish Kumar's popularity has significantly declined? Or is it simply the fact that over 15 years, there is a fatigue factor?
No, it's not simply fatigue. If you go back to the fact that in 2015, Nitish Kumar campaign was a very, very people-oriented campaign. It had definite promises. And out of all the promises, for example, there were cycle peddlers. There were people on cycle who were going around saying 15 lakh rupiya aapke account mein aayega. And that was a very anti-BJP pitch to Nitish Kumar's personal campaign. So this time around, people are tallying what he said to what he did. And in the last 2 years, he's certainly been a chief minister who's not really been very, very open. I had mentioned on an earlier program, whether it was the Muzaffarpur ashram issue, or it has been the mishandling of the floods in Patna last year, or the Chamki Bukhar. On many issues, people have come around to speaking. And also at the time of the corona pandemic, his quietude, his quietness, even the BJP itself felt that Yogi Adityanath in Uttar Pradesh was doing a far more better job getting the students from Kota or getting his labor back, sending buses, even picking up Bihari labor and getting them till Gorakhpur bus stand. So there is a definite anti-incumbency, and the chehre ki rajniti in an atmosphere where there is so much anti-incumbency is something that the BJP should have thought about. Its own cadres were very upbeat about going a little against Nitish Kumar or the combination, but the decision was for a coalition. And now you can see, notwithstanding the coalition, you can see that people are expressing a definite resentment against the government.
But
it's
the
not
fact
simply
is,
fatigue, it's also people's questioning of what has happened in the last 3 years.
Sure, but the fact is also, and this is where Supriya Shrineth of the Congress party, you have tied up with Lalu's party. The fact is, Nitish Kumar keeps reminding the voters, compare me from 2005 to 2020 with Lalu Prasad from 1990 to 2005. And they say, and he keeps emphasizing, do you want to return back to Lalu Raj? Do you believe that that is a comparison which will continue to weigh down the so-called Gadbandhan of the RJD Congress?
Absolutely not. And I think Nitish Kumar, your panel spoke about anti-incumbency and things like that. I will focus a little bit on governance. And in fact, I should call it misgovernance. And I think political people make arguments without facts. Let's just quote some statistics here. You said unemployment is a big factor, and I'll tell you why. Because unemployment rate in Bihar is 46%, which is the highest anywhere in India, which means almost every second Bihari is unemployed. Amongst the youth, that rate is over 55%. So are you telling me the youth is not frustrated? And when you talk about jobs, Nitish Kumar and Sushil Modi turn around and say within 2 months we are going to do it when we are elected back to power. What were you doing for 15 years? When you talk about COVID management, they said not enough hospitals were made by Lalu Prasad Yadav. What did you do for 15 years? Literacy. And that's another thing that, when I heard you and I was seeing the figures on TV, that's a big factor here. And I'll tell you why. Because Bihar used to top the literacy charts in the country. It is now trailing behind some of the poorest states in the country. And that is a big factor. Crime against women, and I'm sorry to say even corruption charges that are being made against Nitish Kumar, the so-called Sushasan Babu, the so-called clean image, has taken a complete toll. I mean, he's inaugurating bridges which are collapsing the very next day or collapsing before inauguration. So all of this put together, and his complete abject silence when his state was going through a pandemic just like the rest of the country was, and locking himself up for 6 months, not being visible for his people, will obviously take a beating. And which is why I think the whole Sushasan Babu image has taken a toll. We are seeing Kushasan, and that's what Bihar will vote on. I have no doubt in my mind.
Let's just take our viewers through some very important insights from the CSDS Lokniti poll. Net, when voters were asked, should Nitish Kumar be given another chance, 31% said yes, Nitish deserves another chance. That's 3 out of 10 voters. 26% said no. That's 1 out of 4 voters. But 34% said there should be a new leader. Now, this is important, Rajdeep. 1 in 3 voters in the state of Bihar said that there should be a new leader in the state. And it gets even more interesting as you start dicing this data further. Because in the next question, and this is where we look now at BJP voters and JDU voters. We look at the NDA voters. 58% of the BJP voters say there should be another chance for Nitish, but 30% say there should not be Nitish Kumar in power again. They want that there be a new leader. And if you look at the next data set, which is even more significant, which is that in 2010, 91% of BJP voters, listen carefully, wanted Nitish Kumar as chief minister again. 9 out of 10 voters. That's now crashed to almost half. Only 55% of BJP voters in 2020 now want Nitish Kumar as chief minister. This is one of the biggest, most burning highlights of this opinion poll, Rajdeep?
I think that first graphic in particular that you gave, yes, another chance for Nitish, 31%, no, 26%, but new leader, 34%. You know, the fact is when you add new leader plus 26%, that's 60%. You know, there's a sense that people now want a new face. Even if you want the BJP, JDU combined back, you want a new face. Bihar is a state which is hankering in that sense for a change from the sort of traditional politicians, the Lalus, the Nitishus who have dominated the state's landscape. And I think that's important and significant in this election. Rajat Sethi, do you get a sense that the BJP would like to use this opportunity to perhaps finally get chief ministership of Bihar sometime in the next 5 years? These numbers would suggest that even the BJP voters, 55% of them are saying, we don't want Nitish. We'll vote for the BJP, but we don't want Nitish.
No, I think, Rajdeep, one thing is pretty evident from this survey, if you were to believe this survey, is that there is significant amount of anti-incumbency. But you also need to keep in mind that there is no rallying force to capture or galvanize that anti-incumbency votes and try and pull down Nitish from the CM chair. One thing that doesn't add into the larger set of data points that you have put forth is Tejasvi Yadav getting the #2 spot as the favored CM position with a vote share of as much as 26 or 27%. I think had Tejasvi Yadav had this much of support, which is almost like 1/3 of the state support, he would have been necessarily been able to capture the anti-incumbency vote towards the Mahagathbandhan. But he has...
Sure, let me explain that. You know, the fact is that is traditionally the RJD vote is in that range. So the RJD voter with Lalu Prasad in jail is choosing Tejasvi as the natural alternative. So it's not surprising that Tejasvi is getting 20% plus in terms of popularity. His problem is to take it ahead of Nitish Kumar, to emerge as a clear alternative.
I think you're downplaying the Tejasvi factor. Look at his rallies, they're drawing crowds, huge crowds, rapturous response. Point 2, many people had dismissed Tejasvi. He iske bas ki nahi hai.
But
Rahul, politician hi nahi hai, nikalta hi nahi hai.
Rahul, the
poll says that that's not true.
No, the problem at the moment for a voter, I don't want Nitish Kumar. Let's say I'm today a voter in Bihar who doesn't want Nitish Kumar.
Sure.
I've been a traditional voter of an anti-BJP voter. Who do I go to? An anti-BJP voter today has no option but to look at Tejasvi because he's projected as the opposition face. Maybe Rahul Verma of CPR, Center for Policy Research, can explain that to us. Explain the conundrum of Tejasvi Yadav doing reasonably well as a chief ministerial candidate, and B, contrast this to what happened in the Lok Sabha where a CSDS poll said 1 in every 4 voters for the BJP voted for the BJP because Narendra Modi was the prime ministerial candidate. So do you see a big difference in that context also, the Modi factor, and how do you see the Tejasvi factor?
So thank you, Rajdeep. You mentioned about 2 things, anger and fatigue. And let me also add the third factor, which is confusion. And the survey was conducted 10 days before. At that time, the big conversation in media and other places was that BJP has propped up Chirag Paswan and LJP to contest separately, and BJP wants to get its own chief minister instead of Nitish Kumar. And that's why you are seeing this split in the data, which Rahul Kamal was just pointing out. So what you are basically seeing that JDU supporters are overwhelmingly going for Nitish Kumar, but the BJP voter is confused, and they are more likely to support a new leader instead of Nitish Kumar. So I'm not saying that the popularity of Nitish Kumar has not come down. There is definitely dissatisfaction with his government, but data is resembling this confusion.
No. So does that mean Rahul, does that mean that the confused BJP voter decides not to vote for the BJP JDU combined, looks for options? Is this where, you know, the fact that you've got a Chirag Paswan actually putting up candidates, some of them from the BJP against JDU, does that all play out on the ground then?
Absolutely. So the mood couple of weeks ago within the BJP leadership seemed like that we can get our own chief minister. And you will see in last 10 days, from Amit Shah to Sushil Modi, everyone trying to clarify that Chirag Paswan is not part of NDA. He's vote katua. Nitish Kumar is our face. No matter, even if BJP gets higher seat, Nitish Kumar would be the CM of Bihar. So I think the big question going forward is whether BJP leadership manages to thwart this confusion which was created 2 weeks back to the upper caste BJP voter, especially in the seats where JDU is contesting, comes out, turns out first and continues to vote for NDA.
No,
if
so
that doesn't happen, then the alliance is in trouble.
Parajita Sarangi is the national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and the situation that BJP voters are dealing with is that if you're a BJP voter, you know, you're strongly going out voting for the BJP. If on your seat there's a BJP candidate, but if there's a JDU candidate, you're kind of confused. And this data over the last 10 years suggests that in 2010, 91% BJP voters wanted Nitish Kumar as CM. That's now crashed to 55%, a 36% drop in the number of BJP voters. So basically that means that 1 in 3 who are BJP voters don't want Nitish Kumar as Chief Minister again. That's a big challenge your party needs to deal with, ma'am.
Okay, I think we're going to start.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. In fact,
yes, I hear you well, ma'am.
There's some audio problem. Yes.
Go ahead.
I would say after seeing this opinion poll that I'm pleasantly, initially, there was some kind of fear, let me tell you. But then the opinion poll showed that Nitish Kumar would be the chief minister. He is standing at 31%. But let us acknowledge that he has put in 15 years, the longest serving chief minister in the northern part of the country. And there would be anti-incumbency, there would be anger, there would be fatigue. But let's acknowledge that he's still standing at 31%, and 20% of the people who have actually not expressed their opinion would have come this side. Maybe, you know, if they would have expressed opinion, maybe a part of that. 4% is with Sushil Modi.
Now, does it also show, and maybe Swapan Dasgupta, you can take this, does it also show that the BJP doesn't have an option? You know that the BJP this time, BJP, Swapan, no, ma'am, there's some audio problem.
I'm coming at the end, please let me speak. I'm coming at the end, please.
Yeah, we are struggling with your audio.
I was listening to the...
Yeah, go ahead.
Please let me speak. I came at the end, let me speak.
Yes,
I was listening to the spokesperson from the Congress. We were talking of the development parameters. See, if Nitish Kumar is at 31% today, even after 15 years, I think we should give credit to his performance, one, and we have to look at the development parameters. In fact, please allow me to give you some data. Average growth rate was 3.16%. The agriculture growth rate, there is a 5% increase. The earlier, when Nitish Kumar took over, only 18% of the houses were electrified. Now it's 100% houses in Bihar electrified. 37% road were in nature when he took over. And now it's almost 80% roads concrete. 3.30 lakh teachers have been recruited, and there has been 60% increase in their salary. Some of the parameters I could put forth because of paucity of time, I cannot go further. The second issue I would definitely like to mention is that there is Modi factor. We have been listening to everybody, but nobody is talking about the Modi factor. Modi factor is there. We are extending a big support.
No, I take your point. In fact, I mentioned the fact that in the 2019 general elections, 1 in 4 BJP voters voted for the BJP because Mr. Modi was Prime Minister. But Mr. Modi is not fighting this election. And, you know, that is an important factor. But now do you want to give a data point?
So let's do that. You know, the level of satisfaction with the central government is 9% more than the level of satisfaction with the state government. 61% of the respondents in this Lokniti-CSDS poll said they were satisfied with the performance of the Modi government. 52%, let's say, they were satisfied with the Nitish government. So the satisfaction with the central government, despite the dip in the economy, despite the fact that we're in the middle of a recession and in the middle of a pandemic, is 61%. So while Nitish Kumar has lost that Teflon touch, and this is where I want to go across to Shwapan Dasgupta, it seems that Narendra Modi is untouchable. Yes, the level of dissatisfaction has jumped up in comparison with the Lok Sabha elections recently, but if you compare with the past, and even despite all the issues that are being dealt with by the country at this moment, 61% of the respondents say they are satisfied with the work being done by the central government. What do you make of that, Shwapan Dasgupta?
Well, I think there are a couple of things which I make of it. Firstly, as you quite rightly mentioned, I think the popularity of the central government still seems to be fairly intact. The popularity of the Prime Minister is more or less intact. Now, the question really boils down to how much bounce does the Prime Minister contribute towards an election where he's obviously not the candidate. He's not going to be the Chief Minister. Now, this is one thing which is very, very difficult to ascertain. You know, what is the quantum at which Modi helps the push? But certainly he does play a significant role, but it's impossible to quantify. What it seems from
the reason why, Swapan, sorry to intervene, the reason why this becomes critical is if you saw what happened last year. Mr. Modi and the BJP sweep elections across several states, but then when state elections are held in Maharashtra, in Jharkhand, in Haryana, there's a drop from anything from 10 to 20% in the BJP's vote. Now,
I mean, but Rajdeep, let's not be selective about Maharashtra. Maharashtra was a very, very different thing, where the people who won the election didn't form the government. That's a different one. No, but I'm talking about the different things. I'm saying that Narendra is where there is a strong regional leader and there is a strong prime minister. I think that is obviously the ideal combination. Now, here what we have is that after 15 years, there has been a certain dent in the image of Nitish Kumar. The quantum of the dent is, is stated in your poll. Now, how much? Now, number one, the question we have to ask is how much does the NDA's voting record ultimately on polling days get boosted by the factor that there is a reassurance of the Prime Minister? Number one. Number two, and I think which is also becoming very, very clear, is that despite all the misgivings they may have of Nitish Kumar, the individual, there is, I think, an equally profound sense of disquiet at the prospect as to what constitutes the alternative. And I think that's really what is making this audio different. That it's not that Tejasvi Yadav's relative inexperience which is talking. Any person who's been propped up by that formidable MY alliance is normally gets a leg up. But the fact that there is still the residual memory of the jungle Raj which Lalu Prasad Yadav perpetuated, and that Bihar has seen a great deal of improvement. And I think that's really what's shoring up everything despite all the difficulties. Right. And to a very large extent, as Rahul Verma rightly pointed out, the BJP figures may be news-driven response. And I think it'll be interesting if you do a poll sometime towards the fag end of the campaign, you might find a greater firming up of support for the NDA, and that's inevitably what happens in any election.
That's interesting.
It firms up.
That's interesting, but Rahul, one of the conundrums is that this is perhaps the first election with these numbers that the BJP could emerge conceivably. We'll see what our final numbers are as the #1 party of Bihar, something it's never done. But it has to still prop up Nitish Kumar as the chief ministerial candidate. Why is it the BJP, which is in this election in pole position in that sense to emerge #1, not saying we'll have one of our own? Because they know back of their mind, they cannot allow Nitish Kumar to go to the other side.
Plus, they saw what happened in Maharashtra. They want to be back in power.
Also 2015, Nitish plus Lalu, caste arithmetic defeats the Modi chemistry. So there is that fear. But I think Swapan makes a point with Chitranjan, jo RJD's spokesperson is with us. चितरंजन जी, ये कहा जा रहा है कि एक तो बात है कि नीतीश कुमार धीरे धीरे कमजोर हो रहे हैं, लेकिन दूसरी तरफ जब लोग देखते हैं और कहते हैं तेजस्वी, क्या वाकई उनमें अनुभव है? कैन तेजस्वी रियली रन बिहार? ये जो सवाल जो लोगों के मन में आता है, दैट में हेल्प नीतीश कुमार, देयर इज नो ऑप्शन, कोई ऑल्टरनेटिव नहीं है। किस तरह से आप देखते हैं?
जो लोग एनडीए में हैं नीतीश जी के मुख्यमंत्रित्व में ही तेजस्वी यादव डिप्टी सीएम रहे हैं 20 महीना, और 20 महीना का उनका कार्यकाल जो रहा है काफी अप्रिशिएट किया है लोगों ने महसूस किया है कि एक अच्छा शासन और प्रशासन तेजस्वी यादव दे सकते हैं, और इसलिए लोगों का विश्वास तेजस्वी यादव के प्रति बढ़ा है। इसी अनुभव का जो मामला ये लोग उठा रहे हैं उसका कोई असर यहाँ के मतदाता पर नहीं पड़ने वाला, क्योंकि यहाँ के लोग देख चुके हैं 20 महीना डिप्टी सीएम के रूप में, पथ निर्माण मंत्री के रूप में उनके कार्यकलापों को लोगों ने देखा है, महसूस किया है, और निश्चित रूप से इस सरकार में जितना बेहतर काम 20 महीना में हुआ वो एक जो महागठबंधन की सरकार थी, इसलिए अब अनुभव का मामला उठाना तेजस्वी यादव पर यह तो जो है सो केवल
Supriya Shinath, it's interesting though that both the major national parties are still dependent on the regional leaders. You know, the Congress is banking on Tejasvi, and the BJP in a way is aware that it cannot do without Nitish. So what does that suggest? That is Bihar politics still fought in the template of regional politics? Yes, the BJP's popularity, the Prime Minister's popularity high, but at the local level, you've got to fight it on local factors.
You know, quite frankly, the BJP on its own has not won a single state election after February 2017, barring Uttar Pradesh, which was February 2017. So I don't know what chemistry do we keep talking about and the, you know, the charisma. But Rajdeep, the reality is that there have been rise of regional parties.
I'll tell you what, just a minute, ma'am, just a minute. The charisma we are talking is just in April 2019, in the general elections, remember, the BJP-led alliance led in 223 out of 243 segments of Bihar.
Yes. No, fair point. And I concede that. I concede the fact that in Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, we won. And then, of course, the BJP won in national elections. But they lost those state elections. At the height of his popularity, Mr. Modi lost Delhi and he also lost Bihar. But, of course, that was a different combination. But I will say on the regional parties point that you're making, it is a reality that there have been rise of regional parties. And national parties have played second fiddles or have been junior partners in that state. We can't look away from that reality. But unlike the BJP, we don't try and cannibalize our allies. We don't try and cut them short, because in Bihar, quite frankly, despite what the BJP leaders are telling you on the record, I don't know where the Gathbandhan really is. Is it with BJP and the JDU? Is BJP and LJP also in this together? Because Chirag Paswan says, "Mera dil kaat kar dekhiye, usme Modi ji milenge."
No, but can I just point out to our viewers,
to understand what's
since
really
we are talking
there.
to the Congress spokesperson,
Sure.
if you deep dive into the traditional vote bases of each of the parties, so those who identify themselves as traditional BJP, Congress, JDU, RJD voters, only 47% of those who self-identified themselves as traditional Congress voters are voting for the Gathbandhan, whereas 83% who said they were traditional RJD voters said they'll vote for Gathbandhan. 71% of those who were traditional BJP voters will vote for NDA. 70% of those who are traditional JDU voters will vote for NDA. So it's the Congress which is the weakest link in this Mahagathbandhan. You've got 70 plus seats, but this poll seems to suggest that the Congress is the weakest link in all these four parties. But I want to come now to that question which was being asked about the impact of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister. And this is crucial, because when we asked NDA voters, those who said they were voting NDA, why are you voting NDA? And think of this very rationally, this is not a national election, this is a assembly election. Even though it's an assembly election, only 16% of the respondents said they'd vote for the NDA because of the work of the Nitish government. 27% of the respondents said they would vote for NDA because of the work done by the Modi government. 29% said because of their MLA. But the number of people who are voting for the NDA, Parajita, because of the work done by the Nitish government is 11% less than the number of people who are voting for the NDA because of the work done by the Narendra Modi government.
And can I just add to that, Aparajita, can you tell us therefore, based on what Rahul has just said, why is the BJP actually keen on projecting one of its own as chief minister? That today Mr. Modi is going to do rallies with Nitish Kumar, but the aim is somewhere in the next 5 years, if there is an NDA government, the BJP wants the chief ministership as now the senior partner. Is that true or not?
See, as
Yes, ma'am.
made extremely clear by the BJP leadership that Nitish Kumar would be the next chief minister. He would be the chief minister again. And there is solid support from BJP to Nitish ji.
Is it solid? Is it solid? Is it as solid as that?
Absolutely solid.
Is it a compulsion? Is it a compulsion because you cannot afford him to switch sides?
I wish there was more focus on. Modi factor, the popularity of the Prime Minister in this debate. We have been talking about everything in Bihar, about Nitish Kumar and his works. I myself said about, about all the developmental parameters and his performance therein. But at the same time, we must acknowledge that there is Modi factor on the ground. And this has actually been told by one of you, but there should be more emphasis on this. In fact,
but Mr. Modi is not the chief minister of Bihar, ma'am.
Hugely impacting the poll results in every state. In every state, huge amounts of money under various centrally sponsored schemes are going to the states. And Modi's popularity will definitely translate into good results for the NDA. In fact, we can say with conviction that there would be 2/3 majority for NDA. And it has been made very clear by the BJP leadership that Nitish Kumar would be the chief. And at this juncture, I don't think we should get into any kind of debate regarding who would be the chief minister.
Okay.
If BJP would go for somebody else, I think this is beside the point at this juncture.
It's interesting. I think there is a point in that, Rahul. What we are not recognizing is 25 kilos of food grain have been given to migrant families in different parts of Bihar, and in the flood-affected areas, cash transfers have been made. Now, whether that is identified with Mr. Modi or whether it's identified with Nitish Kumar, either way, it's identified with this double engine ki sarkar. I think somewhere Nitish Kumar this time is being pushed up by Narendra Modi.
But he's gone into a shell. You've known Nitish for so long. We've all seen his politics. He's hardly going out meeting people. He's hardly as accessible as he used to be. He's done no interviews. Not that an interview is a barometer. It's about how willing are you to, take on questions. He's boxed himself into a shell.
Right. He's boxed himself. I think that's a good word because Rahul, he has no options. What does he do in case the BJP pushes him to the wall? Can he go back?
He's not fighting like a man who's confident, who's going on, see my track record and vote for me. He's saying, remember what Lalu used to do? I mean, you've been chief minister for 15 years, you're still saying, remember what Lalu used to do. He is not demonstrating a level of confidence which a chief minister who still is the most popular man in the state, whose party, and we'll just tell you when we come back on the other side of a quick break, could potentially still form the government. Could it? Is it a done deal? What may happen? We've kind of built this up so far, giving you a sense of the level of satisfaction, dissatisfaction with the government. But when we come back, we'll come to the operative part. Bihar mein Kaaba.
Hello and welcome to this India Today special, the Lokniti-CSDS Battle for Bihar Opinion Poll, a centimeter that is giving us a sense of what is happening on the ground in the first big election of 2020. The first election also being fought under COVID protocols.
What we're about to show you is the vote share and seat share projection done by Lokniti-CSDS for the state of Bihar. But before that, I want you to think about something very carefully. This poll suggests, Rajdeep, that 1 in 4 respondents in Bihar at this moment are undecided or they can change their mind. 10% of the respondents said they hadn't made up any mind, and 14% voted for some party in this poll but said last moment pe hum badal bhi sakte hain, which means that 1 in 4 respondents have told CSDS Lokniti that they could change their mind. With that, Let's now show you the overall vote share and seat share numbers according to the CSDS Lokniti poll.
That's right. Remember, there are 243 seats in Bihar. What is the projected vote share first? The Lokniti-CSDS pre-poll survey, NDA, which is basically the BJP, JDU, of course, smaller parties like the Vikashsheel Insan Party, 38%. 38% to the NDA is as per our poll survey. The Mahagathbandhan gets 32%. Projected vote share is 32%. The GDSF, the smaller parties that have come together, 7% is what they are getting at the moment. The LJP, fighting this election on its own in about 143 seats, is getting 6%. Others, which is a substantial number. Remember, a large number of smaller parties have come together. Asauddin Owaisi, Pappu Yadav, Chandrasekhar, Mayawati, all fighting, are getting 17% at the moment. So a 6% gap between the NDA and the Mahagathbandhan is what we are predicting. How is this transferring into seats? That's the big number that you want to know, really. What is happening in terms of seats if elections are held in Bihar today? Remember, the polling starts next week. Projected seat share, Lokniti-CSDS pre-poll. NDA 133 to 143. Halfway mark is 122. NDA 133 to 143, so above the halfway mark, but not getting a 2/3 majority that many have been projecting. 133 to 143, just above the halfway mark of 122. The Mahagathbandhan 88 to 98, so just short of the 3-figure mark. And remember, this includes the left parties as well, which are part of the RJD, Congress, left parties, Mahagathbandhan. LJP is 2 to 6. So Chirag Paswan, as per our poll, remains in single digits, not making much of an impact. Others, and this could include parties from Upendra Kushwaha's party to Asauddin Owaisi to Pappu Yadav, are 6 to 10 at the moment. So, as of now, Rahul, we are predicting, as per the CSDS Lokniti poll, today the NDA has the edge, but not a substantial edge, not a sweep at the moment.
Let's do a deep dive into the vote share and seat share numbers according to this Lokniti-CSDS opinion poll. If you look at how the vote shares are moving, and if you combine all these parties between 2015 and now, and I'll take the vote share data first, the NDA vote share is at 38%, which includes Jiten Ram Majhi's Hindustan Awam Morcha, Mukesh Sahni's Vikashsheel Insan Party, the VIP. There's a 6% gap according to this poll. But what is very significant is the fact that the GDSF, the Grand Democratic Secular Front, which has the Rashtriya Lok Samta Party, the RLSP of Upendra Kushwaha, it has Mayawati's BSP, it has Asauddin Owaisi's AIMIM, is taking away 7% of the vote. If these small parties, which are now a separate opposition front, were somehow part of the opposition, 32 plus 7 is 39, which would have been more than the 38% that the NDA is getting. So that 7% split vote in the opposition, because the opposition is not united. You've got 6% vote going to the Lok Jan Shakti party. You've got 7% vote going to this disparate alliance of the AIMIM, the BSP and the RLSP primarily. You've got a situation emerging where the NDA has a 6% gap. It's a comfortable gap at this moment, helped by the fact that the opposition is split. Let's now show you voting intention and look at the seat share numbers. Remember, the magic mark in the 243 seat assembly of Bihar is 122. Out of this, the Gathbandhan is projected to get 88 to 98 seats. This poll suggests, and the ground reports that we're getting from our reporters in the field suggest, that the strike rate of the Bharatiya Janata Party is expected to be higher and better than the strike rate of the Janata Dal United, especially on seats where you've got the Lok Jan Shakti Party putting up strong upper caste candidates. They seem to be damaging the prospects of the JDU candidates. So you could end up with a situation where the BJP emerges as the single largest party, the JDU coming in at number 2. That's the projection according to this poll. And even though the GDSF is not bagging too many seats, taking away 7% of what is clearly an anti-incumbency, anti-government vote is definitely helping the prospects of the NDA in this election.
Absolutely, Rahul. You know, it's unfair in a way to compare 2015 to 2020 because, of course, the alliances have dramatically changed in 5 years. Then the Mahagathbandhan was a real Mahagathbandhan. It included Nitish, Lalu and the Congress. Now Nitish is, of course, with the NDA. But let's get first reactions, because clearly what we are projecting is an NDA victory, but not the kind of overwhelming victory that the NDA was hoping for based on how well it did in 2019. Remember, when it won 39 of the 40 Lok Sabha seats. So clearly what we are seeing is a reflection of some element of anti-incumbency, but as per our poll, not enough to actually result in a change in guard in Patna. Swapan Dasgupta, your first reactions to these poll numbers that seem to be suggesting that it is advantage NDA, but clearly not the kind of decisive advantage at the moment that maybe the NDA would have hoped for.
There are 2 or 3 qualifications I'd like to make firstly. The first issue is about the turnout. I think this is the first election which is going to happen in a COVID situation. So we've got to be very, very careful, and we've got to be very watchful about what is the quantum of turnout. If we are assuming that it's going to be a normal turnout, that may not happen. And if that doesn't happen, who does it favor? That's a question mark. Secondly, the question which really arises is that there is still a large degree of undecided voters, perhaps a disproportionately large numbers. Where will they go? Third, the following of both the Upendra Kushwaha-led alliance as well as the Lok Janshakti Party seems a bit, I think you cannot say that these are basically going to endure till polling day. We'll have to see that. And if it doesn't, who does it benefit? So having put in these caveats and qualifications, I would say that what we are seeing is an election where there is a tilt, a decisive tilt in favor of the NDA at present. Now, by logic, in such situations, when a particular party goes into the last 3-4 days of an election with an advantage, that advantage further consolidates. That's the nature of the dynamics of the poll.
Sure.
So I expect perhaps the NDA to consolidate the figures you've given today and perhaps add to that somewhat.
Let me get Dr. Sandeep.
Let's look at the turnout.
Sure. I concede that turnout could be a critical factor. Dr. Sandeep Shastri, since you are associated with Lokniti, you want to justify your numbers. Do you believe, as Swapan Dasgupta suggests, that these numbers give a decisive edge to the NDA? Would you call it decisive? Or do you believe that given that even a couple of percent either way now could make a difference, this poll suggests that we are in for a closer fight than we anticipated?
Rajdeep, given the situation when the survey was done, it clearly shows an advantage for the NDA-led alliance. And I think prior to the start of formal campaign, if there is a 6 percentage point lead that an alliance has, it makes for a very, very critical advantage. And I think this data, Rajdeep, also goes to summarize some of the debates we have had. Nitish is on the back foot. Yes, his popularity is less. However, the support of BJP, support of the hardcore BJP voters, given the fact that the BJP is the major player in the NDA, and they have conceded that we have projected Nitish Kumar as the chief minister. You bring all those factors together, though the government does not have the type of popularity it had 5 to 6 years ago, the state government I mean, I think it's in that context that the data shows that it's not a huge majority that seems to be projected, but just above the 50% mark, given all the factors that we have discussed as part of today's
but you know what I'm most
let me make one more point
flowing
from this poll, Rajdeep.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to make one more point. I think the campaign is about to begin, and you will have the leaders coming out in the campaign. And I think the hope of the NDA would be that the Prime Minister would be critical in swinging more votes in their favor. On the other hand, I think the Mahagathbandhan would see that its leadership at the state level, which is critical, would play a major role in bringing the alliance more votes. So I think that will be a critical factor in terms of the campaign. We have not seen Nitish campaigning. We are likely to see the Prime Minister campaigning. The Mahagathbandhan leadership is active in the campaign. I think all these factors will play out as you see the next 3 weeks unfold.
Rahul Verma, 24% of the respondents undecided in some way, 10% saying we haven't made up our mind, 14% gave Lokniti-CSDS a response, but said we are 50-50, could change our mind on polling day. That's 1 in 4 respondents saying they are ambivalent, they are confused, they haven't made up their mind. Is that abnormally high, or is that rather usual at this stage of the campaign? And which way are these undecided voters likely to sway? Rahul.
So this is a, thank you, Rahul. This is a pretty usual number which you see in most state elections in India, where 1 in 4 voter remains undecided. Undecided voters tend to basically go with what we call as hawa or mahal. So if the election starts sort of like gaining momentum for one particular alliance, the undecided are more likely to shift in that side. And what we might also see, which Swapanji was pointing out, that apart from undecided, even the smaller parties will shrink. So today LJP might be estimated at 6% and OSC Alliance might be estimated at 7%. Those will also shrink and they will go towards one side. Now, whether it is going to be NDA, given they already have a critical edge, plus if they manage to sort out the confusion, if that happens, you might see a much, much bigger lead for the NDA.
Okay, Gaurav Bhatia of the BJP joins us. Gaurav, this poll suggests that while the NDA is at this moment well poised to form the next government, there is growing dissatisfaction amongst core BJP voters about who should be next CM. In 2010, 90% of the BJP voters wanted Nitish Kumar as Chief Minister. Lokniti-CSDS telling us that that figure is now down to 55. You are in pole position, but your party's own voters are not as enthusiastic about Nitish Kumar as they've been in past elections. How do you deal with this quandary?
Okay, so Rahul, first of all, I think even going by the numbers that your channel is showing, the government is formed by the NDA and
is by quite a margin in terms of seat as well. A panelist was talking about the vote percentage margin, it was 6%. And the number of seats, even a conservative estimate is 10 or 11 seats more than the majority number mark that is required in Bihar. So I think it is clear that we are having an advantageous position. When the elections will come close and when Narendra Modi ji and Nadda ji and other senior BJP leaders will go and campaign, we are very sure that people of Bihar will repose their faith in us. Second, even the people of Bihar understand that they might be undecided today, but they will never go for a party that is in a confused state of mind, like RJD. They are not even sure whether to place the picture of Lalu Prasad Yadav or not. Congress is a party which is not in a dominant position. It is ready to contest the number of seats given by the RJD, the major player. Whereas, what is the NDA offering? A better coordination between the central government and the state government, which is the key to development. And that is how Bihar politics has changed in the last 15 years. And majority of the years, JDU has been with the BJP. Therefore, we are very optimistic that we will at least get 2/3 majority in the forthcoming
this poll, of course, doesn't show you getting a 2/3 majority, so you're significantly down compared to 2019 general election. But no, it doesn't. I have to go by the poll numbers, sir. I have to go by the poll.
The government is still asked, can you dispute that?
Of course, sir. You said to
dispute that.
Sir,
all that I'm saying is I respect your numbers, but I disagree with it.
Okay, Rohan Gupta of the Congress joins us. Rohan Gupta, the first part of the program, we were looking at largely how Nitish's popularity has gone down significantly, and there is an element of anti-incumbency. But as the big numbers are showing, you're not able to capitalize on that. There's a sense that the opposition has not fully got its act together to capitalize on the anti-incumbency, and that might explain the 40-seat gap, a 30-40 seat gap at the moment between the Mahagathbandhan and the NDA.
This election and betrayal of trust
this current government. People are not going to forget what has happened during the lockdown or the COVID period. People are not going to forget what has happened to migrant labor. I was in Bihar for last 7 days, and on ground, the people's dissatisfaction is at a different level. There is 46% of unemployment. You ask any youth there, unemployment is the biggest issue. And Rajdeep, whatever analysis you make sitting in studios, if you see anger of people and your poll shows large number of people who have not decided yet, I see a strong dissatisfaction against the current government, whether it is Nitish Kumar or Modi ji. BJP spokesperson was talking about Modi ji. There is a strong dissatisfaction against BJP because they haven't got anything. One important more thing, they are caught in the Bermuda Triangle. The people of Bihar, they are not going to be trapped in this Bermuda Triangle of JDU, BJP and LJP. Look what they are doing. LJP is in Modi government but not fighting in the alliance. JDU, which is not there in Modi government but fighting the alliance. People of Bihar, they are smart enough to understand this practice of BJP and the alliance. They are not going to decide, they are not going to give them the chance.
So it's interesting the BJP claims momentum, the Congress or the Mahagathbandhan claims an undercurrent. Let's get more reactions to that. Undercurrent versus momentum. Javed Ansari, you want to respond to that? Do you sense in these numbers a much closer fight than perhaps we thought was possible? Or do you believe that once Mr. Modi enters the campaign, 12 rallies with Nitish Kumar, the momentum will defeat the undercurrent?
Look, Rajdeep, if past elections are to go by, we've seen, and Delhi is a glaring example, that where Mr. Modi is not a candidate, his ability to actually deliver a state becomes all that more difficult. There is absolutely no denying the fact he's the tallest leader in the country and a big draw. But even he and Mr. Shah combined have not been able to deliver states. They weren't able to deliver Jharkhand. They were unable to deliver. Delhi. And the Lokniti-CSDS poll also says that that a lot of BJP and LJP and JDU voters believe that they only voted for the BJP NDA last time because Mr. Modi was the candidate. In polls there are two things. Yes, arithmetic is critical, but so is the chemistry. And if you listen to I've been following what our reporters have been saying, the India Today reporters from the ground, the anecdotal evidence points to something else, that it is not a done deal. In the first program that we did 2 weeks ago, all of us, including myself, felt that it was a done deal. But it's not a done deal.
Okay, so you're saying it's not a done deal. Rajat Sethi? Rajat Sethi, you want to respond? Do you think it's a done deal, or do you believe that this kind of verdict, pre-poll, suggests that this is a tough contest?
See, I came to your show a couple of weeks back and I said it was a done deal and it was almost like a walkover that MGB was giving to the NDA. But this verdict that at least this opinion poll is showing clearly makes us, think deeper as to how fierce is the anger against Nitish Kumar. A. B, there is something very, very special about a Bihari voter. When surveyors like us, when we go on the ground and interact with the Bihari voter, they are exceptionally smart, very politically aware, and they are generally quiet about their political choice. In fact, they will say that we are undecided, or even they will go to the extent of saying that, why should I tell you? So Bihari voter doesn't easily, reveal what kind of a political choice he or she is going to make. And this is why you see an exceptionally large number of undecided voters. But I certainly believe if I were to define momentum in the way that who was far behind and who is rushing with the highest speed, I would say that MGB has the momentum, but the center of gravity lies with the NDA. NDA is clearly ahead.
This is very clear. It will be about who can get the hawa behind him. And I want Shwapan Das Gupta to answer the question that he posed. He said, you know, turnout will be important, whether it's the US presidential election or the Indian election, which happens around the same time. Indeed, in the middle of a pandemic, turnout is important. On the one side, you've got the superior organizational machinery of the BJP, their ability to pull voters to the booth. The other reality is that a lot of the upper caste, more affluent voters of the BJP are the ones most likely to be most aware of the fear of the pandemic and stay back home. And in any case, the poll seems to suggest they aren't very enthused about Nitish Kumar coming back to power once again. You've got
the last point, Rahul, is critical. How enthused is that BJP voter in a constituency where, let's say, there's a JDU candidate to go out and vote for him?
And the RJD voter, in any case, will go out en masse to vote for RJD and the Mahagathbandhan in the way that he can, because the Muslim Yadav vote bank in this poll is strong. So Shwapan Das Gupta, please try and answer the question that you posed. If voting percentages in Bihar were to take a hit, and they're very likely to because we're in the middle of a pandemic, who does it benefit, who does it hurt?
See, firstly, when we come to the question of turnout, I think what's going to be very crucial is to find out what is the extent of a reduction in turnout of elderly 50-plus age group voters. What impact does that have on the outcome? That's a question which we need to take. Secondly, as far as the muted enthusiasm of the BJP voter is concerned, I think you must realize that BJP voter may be muted in its enthusiasm for Nitish Kumar, but I think they are quite petrified of a return to Lalu. I mean, what they consider the Mahagathbandhan type of. So that negativism, more than anything else, despite all the misgivings they may have over Nitish Kumar, they will go out and vote against RJD. That's, I think, quite big. And I think that in the next, the last stages of the election, you will naturally find that there is a concerted attempt to galvanize the faithful. That's always what the last round of elections is always about.
Your point, well,
how do we firm up the faithful?
You know what?
And that getting the faithful out is very important because their mood becomes infectious in the larger population. That's the sort of mechanics of election.
Your point is well taken, Mr. Dasgupta, but what is clear at the moment is that there is no wave. You see, in 2019, we saw clear wave.
I'm sick. Rajdeep, every election from 2014, you've said the same thing.
No, 1 minute. Swapan, my friend. Swapan, give me half a second. My friend, give me half a second. I'm only going by the numbers, sir.
We can only discover waves in hindsight.
Sir, I agree.
These things we always say, there's confusion, no wave. Every election, even
we had
to the archives, you will find 1984, the journalists were saying the same.
See, my point is...
So this is something which
look at the number of... I have to go by the poll. The poll shows a large number of undecided voters, larger than normal. Remember in 2010, the BJP, JDU got more than 200 seats, swept the polls. 2015, the reverse happened. Nitish and Lalu came together, swept the polls. At the moment, as per this pre-poll, there seems no sweep. That's all I'm saying. But I want to ask you this, Manisha Priyam. In Bihar, there are about 50-60 seats where the RJD has their MY factor, the Muslim Yadav factor, work in the favor. They never go below that number because these seats are their firm seats. But there seem no signs of any plus vote. To get the incremental vote, the Congress is not, as per this survey, punching above its weight. So is that the advantage in a sense that the BJP has, that the BJP perhaps has a better organized cadre on the ground, well mobilized, central government schemes working, and that could make the difference? That the BJP, as per this survey, likely to emerge as party number 1 of Bihar for the first time in its history.
So that's a position that I've held since the opening show, that BJP is going to do very well. It does have a very well galvanized cadre. But the one important thing that I want to talk about here is the fact that this plus factor that you are talking about for the Mahagathbandhan or the JDU's bad performance or this 24% vote. Now, in the parlance of the Bihari, this has been referred to as the Chuppa vote. Chuppa means a silent voter in English. Now, this Chuppa vote was not a silent, non-directional voter. In 2010 and in 2015, the Chuppa voter, I trailed them. These were what were called the Pachphorna castes, the much fragmented EBCs, and they quietly told you that the vote was going to Tir, which meant that they were a consolidated bloc, but did not want to talk in front of the more dominant OBCs. Now, the fact is that this time around, this silent Chuppa voter, 24%, has abandoned the directionality towards the Tir, and that's something that is a question mark. Therefore, even for the BJP, this will give them the nightmare, because what we don't understand, that in a few days from now, the first phase of Magad will go to polls. This is the area where the BJP dissidence has come to play at its best. Most of their strong candidates, even from the Agri Jatis, are standing on LJP tickets, and you will find that there will be a one-on-one between a VIP candidate and an LJP candidate. And what I found on the ground is that the Chuppa voter is asking me the question that neither Mukesh Sahni nor the LJP, it's not equal to Mr. Modi. So there is a confusion amongst this 24% or the Chuppa voter, and this is what is there, which is up for grabs.
Sure. Gaurav Bhatia, for a very long time, it seemed that this election was a done deal, that the NDA would romp home. With LJP breaking away and Chirag Paswan saying, I'm like Hanuman, tear my chest, you'll find Modi inside me. You managed to create some drama in the election. If LJP, JDU and BJP were together, a lot of the excitement levels would be much lesser. And it almost seems as if, whether it's an attempt to be too clever by half or just the manner in which the dice rolled, some of these things have created confusion, according to this poll, not in the minds of the analysts alone, but in the minds, most importantly, from your perspective, of the BJP's core voter. He doesn't know कि चुनाव के बाद क्या होगा, despite everything that Nadda ji has said, that Amit Shah has said. You've clarified officially, but this poll suggests some extent the BJP voter is confused.
In Rahul, I would the BJP voters are
confused at all. Neither is the party. And it's a done deal that the NDA will form the government in Bihar. And look at the irony that Shri Narendra Modi ji commands such respect that a party leader who's not part of the alliance says, "Main Modi ji ka Hanuman hu." And just today, when Kamal Nath was asked that Rahul Gandhi has shown displeasure over your comment, he said, "Fir kya hota hai?" So people within the party are not respecting Rahul Gandhi in the Congress. And my second point is, somebody was talking about chemistry. Yes, there is a chemistry in the Congress alliance also. Two chemicals are working very hard. One is corruption, which we have seen from Lalu to the Congress Gandhi Parivar. And the second is the dynastic politics that they do. Dynastic politics. What is the NDA offering? Clean image of Nitish Kumar ji, just like Narendra Modi ji offers at the center.
Sir, there are enough sons and daughters of JDU BJP leaders, and there are sons and daughters of Congress RJD leaders contesting.
Just stay with us. I want to go across now to one of the most important leaders of the BJP from the state of Bihar, Member of Parliament, Union Minister, and one of the senior most ministers in the NDA government, Ravi Shankar Prasad, who's camped out of Patna, now joins us live and exclusive on this broadcast. Mr. Prasad, welcome. This CSDS Lokniti poll seems to suggest that the NDA will be over the hump, 133 plus seats projected for the NDA, but it also suggests that at the time this poll was done, there was some level of confusion in core BJP voters who weren't as enthusiastic about wanting Nitish Kumar as Chief Minister as they have been in previous elections. What do you make of the key findings, sir?
Well, I was in your sister channel in Hindi and I was given to understand, I hope the same is your stand too, that this survey was done in between 10th of October till 15th of October. And this margin was given that it may change for the better for NDA or even otherwise. Therefore, even the authors of this report have lodged that caveat. I am campaigning in my state for the last more than 8 days, campaigning all over the state. This whole day I was campaigning in my constituency in Phatua, visiting villages after villages. Tomorrow I am spending another day in my constituency in Bakhtiarpur. I am also seeing the mood. And today I visited some of those areas which were no-go area. Just to give you one example, Rahul. Yesterday I was campaigning in Barhi area of Khajoli constituency in Madhubani, just adjacent to Nepal border, 25 kilometers away. When my helicopter was landing, my candidate said, it was a huge crowd of nearly 10,000 people. My candidate said, sir, this was a no-go area for us. After a long time, a BJP leader has landed in the BJP's helicopter. I hope you understand what I'm trying to convey. And the sheer enthusiasm, the welcome, the kind of delivery which Narendra Modi government, Nitish Kumar government has done is now resonating on the ground. That I would like to say, and that is the reason that even after close to 2005 in the third term plus, this kind of response has come. It is going to concretize. We are campaigning very effectively, and once the Prime Minister comes and addresses the 12th meeting, then you see the decisive shift all the more.
But are you concerned, Mr. Prasad, that amongst NDA voters, when they were asked why is it that you're voting for the NDA, 16% said Nitish Kumar's government, 27% said because of the Modi government. Even though this is a state election, the dependence on the Prime Minister and the dependence on the BJP is significantly high for the NDA bloc. Nitish Kumar, this poll suggests, is a diminished version of his former Teflon Sushasan Babu self. He doesn't have the kind of pan-Bihar resonance. It's the BJP that's pulling the NDA, emerging likely as the single largest party, with the Nitish bandwagon just tagging along with the BJP engine.
Rahul, I think you have used rather hard words for Nitish Kumar. That will be very unfair. As a Chief Minister, I know him from my JP movement days. He is my senior. He has performed very well. He is an epitome of integrity and good governance. But yes, what is your problem if my BJP supporters also are keen to support Nitish Kumar because they have greater trust in Narendra Modi government? We are together. My Prime Minister always tells us in our government, Bihar की खूब चिंता करो, बिना बिहार के विकास के देश का विकास नहीं होगा. North East की चिंता करो, बिना North East के विकास के देश का विकास नहीं होगा. That is his commitment. And you come and see. Yesterday I asked in a meeting in Sikiti in Araria, again near Nepal border, how much time it takes for you to go to Patna by car? They say 5 hours. I asked earlier, 10 hours. Today all the Bihar villages have electricity. They have got roads, and now we are bringing optical fiber connectivity to all the 45,000 villages in the first instance in the coming six months. You have to see Ganga, river Ganga, Rahul, had only 2 bridges, Mokama and Patna. Now 2 have come up, about 5 are coming more. Koshi river, other river, electricity connection, digital connection, physical connection, road connection. People have seen. It was illusory in the 15 years of the government you are trying to claim the leader, seeking to portray himself. And by the way, on a lighter vein, Rahul, I hope you come to Patna. There is a Veer Chand Patel Path on which there is a BJP headquarter, there is the JDU headquarter, and then there is the RJD headquarter. The RJD headquarters big banner has only Tejasvi Babu's image, not the father or the mother, who ruled for 15 years. Why? Why you are apprehensive about your own legacy? Because you are also sure once that legacy comes, the entire legacy of loot, of kidnapping, of corruption, stinking corruption, and complete sense of lawlessness will come about. That's how the Bihar election is
Mr. Prasad, is it a two-thirds?
That's what I would like to comment.
Mr. Prasad, just one question. Most opinion polls have put BJP at 160 plus or NDA at 160 plus. Our poll is putting 135 to 145. Are you still looking at, in 2019 you led in 223 segments out of 243. Do you see a diminishing compared to 2019, or do you believe that as time goes on, the equation will change further?
Mr. Rajdeep Sardesai, since morning Rahul Kumar was chasing me. Finally, I agreed I'm a hectic campaign since morning. Now you also chip in. All right, that's your right.
No, your number, sir. I wanted your number.
You keep on these calculations, Mr. Rajdeep Sardesai.
I wanted your number.
We calculate on the ground. We calculate on the ground. It will be a convincing majority of nearly 2/3. Number I will give you, let the whole thing go on. I am telling you it will be a 2/3 majority clearly. And you are yourself saying, even your conservative estimate, which you are trying to project, gives us a clear majority. More than that, if that is what you are giving, it is going to be a surge forward only, more and more.
Mr. Prasad, we saw Chirag Paswan say, one or two more questions, so just one or two more questions. We saw Chirag Paswan say, I'm Hanuman, open my chest, you'll find the image of Narendra Modi. We've seen your party president, we've seen the Home Minister, Amit Shah ji, come out and say that we are strongly backing Nitish Kumar and that there is no question of any change. But this poll suggests amongst BJP voters, at the time when this poll was done, there was some confusion. Are you confident that you've been able to convince BJP voters fully, or are you apprehensive that where there is a JDU candidate up against maybe a rebel from the BJP, an upper caste candidate on an LJP seat, that there could be problems that you'd need to deal with, Mr. Prasad? How do you hope to deal with that?
First of all, I'm happy you are repeatedly lodging the caveat during the time this polling survey was conducted. Always keep that in mind. Yes, the issue of Chirag Paswan ji has already explained by Home Minister, by the party president, here the in charge Devendra Fadnavis, Sushil Modi, Bhupen Yadav, myself repeatedly. Ram Vilas ji was a towering leader. His death is painful. Would have loved to see that Chirag Paswan ji remains with us. He did not. He chose to decide his own course in Bihar. The detail have been explained by Amit Shah ji and JP Nadda ji, who were privy to these negotiations. The matter ends there. The Bihar NDA comprises JDU, BJP, Jitan Ram Manjhi's Hum Party, and very clearly Mukesh Sahni's Vikashil Insan Party. Strong, united. Our workers have no confusion. I will not deny initially there may have been some in some constituency. But now it is very clear, the message has gone, and the Prime Minister is going to campaign for 23rd, he is going to address 12 meetings. There will be no scope for any ambiguity or confusion. And by the way, just don't forget, you asked JDU campaigning BJP. राहुल, हमारे रिश्ते 1995 के हैं. इस बात को आप कृपया कभी ना भूलें. बिहार की बीजेपी जमीन पर और नीतीश कुमार की जेडीयू पहले समता पार्टी की पार्टी जमीन पर. हम एक दूसरे को समझते हैं, पहचानते हैं और ट्रस्ट करते हैं. Never forget that.
So you don't see, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, any possibility of a repeat of Maharashtra, some kind of a super over, that after the election some change takes place?
Rajdeep, I think you will have some separate moments with me, isn't it?
I'm coming to Patna. I'm coming to Patna in a few more
days. We are very emphatic. Whosoever get what? I know you will have Golgappas on the Fraser roads and charts, which are your favorite during campaign. Absolutely. Go and enjoy the good snacks of Patna. Good luck to you. I am only saying, whatever are the numbers, our assurance, our understanding, and our pledge is very clear. Nitish ji will be the Chief Minister.
That's very clear.
Okay, we'll leave it over there. Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, all the best for the rest of the campaign. You've got 1 week to go before the first phase starts. Thank you so much for joining us on this opinion poll discussion. We've got Ajay Alok of the Janata Dal United with us. And the problem for the JDU is that Nitish Kumar's popularity has come down. The dissatisfaction level amongst voters in Bihar seems to be going up. While the central government remains popular, this is not the Nitish Kumar that we've seen over the past 15 years. This is a diminished version of the Teflon Sushasan Babu self.
Well, these kind of dialogues I'm quite pretty used to, because I used to listen to these kind of comments in 2015 also. and nothing was new in 2020. So I'll wait for 10th November. With all due respect to your survey, I still believe that the people of Bihar have reposed their faith again and again, and they will do it again in the coming elections. Don't forget, when you were conducting these surveys, it was between 10th of October to 17th of October. At that point of time, there were many ticket seekers. Many were those who were denied the tickets. Many were those who went to LJP. LJP broke off with the NDA. They went separately. Ram Vilasji's death. All these things combined together.
But Ajay Alok, this is a centimeter that is weighing public sentiment. If there is any worry that you should have, the top issue as per our survey, along with development, is unemployment. And when I look at Nitish government's performance as per the Lokniti-CSDS pre-poll, it's your highest failure is rated among those in the age group 18 to 25. 69% in this age group are saying your government has been a failure. Now, this is a generation that has not seen Lalu Raj. These are all people who are born after 2000, the millennials. Are you worried that the younger Bihari is slowly distancing itself, particularly from the JDU? Is that a concern? Because clearly all our numbers are pointing out to Nitish Kumar's popularity coming down substantially.
Well, I don't think so, because there is a reason attached to it. Number one, whatever the numbers of the unemployment are there, it's there for the whole country, except in the month of April when the COVID started, that the Bihar was ranked at 46.6%, just behind Tamil Nadu and one other more state. But now it has come down significantly to 12.2% as per the CRDE survey. See, Nitish Kumar, it's not a matter of those people who have not seen Lalu Raj. Their parents have seen, their relatives have seen, and everyone has seen. This is a matter of expectation, Rajdeep. In the last 15 years, Bihar has seen unprecedented development. There's a tectonical shift in the people thinking about development. Earlier, I was living in Patna in 2000. My home generator used to run around 16 to 17 hours a day. And I had no complaints in 2000, because that was the norm. How can I expect electricity for 20 hours or 21 hours? So it was a norm that 8 to 9 hours electricity in Patna, it's fine. Rest in Bihar, no place, no electricity, nobody used to bother. Today with electricity, nearly almost 22 to 23 hours everywhere in Bihar, roads connectivity improved dramatically. Living conditions has improved.
Can I just take it, can I for a moment take what you're saying, which is an interesting point, that you believe expectations have been raised by Nitish to the Congress. Rohan Gupta, if you're still with us, give us a sense, do you concede that as is being pointed out, Lalu Prasad is not even on some of the posters? Is there a fear that the moment you bring Lalu Prasad on any poster, people are reminded of his period? While he has his strong Muslim Yadav alliance intact, clearly the BJP, JDU wants to compare their rule with Lalu's rule. Are you ready for an open comparison between your rule and Lalu's rule? Sorry, Lalu's rule and the JDU rule.
First of all, if you see all BJP spokespersons, they are very confident about their win. If they are so confident about their win, why they are bothered about the posters of opposition party? The issue is not that, Rajdeep. If you see on ground, and I'm sure when you go to Patna, you realize it, there is a strong dissatisfaction against this government. If you talk about Mr. Nitish Kumar, he has betrayed trust of people in 2015.
Sir, they may be satisfied, but they don't want to vote for the other side. That is the problem. Yes, they may be dissatisfied with the BJP, JDU, but they don't want to vote for a return to what they see could be Yadav Raj.
Let me complete. मैं एक चीज बोलूंगा कि बिहार में झारखंड होने वाला है. Why I'll tell you. 4 elections have happened after Lok Sabha elections. BJP was in power in 3 of the states. Today BJP is in power only in 1 state, and that is not a full majority government in Haryana. See, whatever media propaganda you do, Rajdeep, at the end of the day, people see what they have received.
So it's not propaganda, it's a poll.
Let me complete. Just 1 minute. If you see Bihar in terms of corona period, pandemic, Bihar is the worst affected state. Whether it is corona pandemic or the migrants issue, people are not going to forget.
Okay.
You won't forget that 25 lakh people who have left Bihar and come back, they are not going to forget.
So joining us also now on this broadcast is the State President of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Sanjay Jaiswal. Mr. Jaiswal, स्वागत है आपका हमारे CSDS लोकनीति ओपिनियन पोल में. जब ये पोल हुआ उस वक्त जो तस्वीर उभर रही है वो ये है कि बीजेपी का जो कोर वोटर है उसमें से केवल 55% ही चाहते हैं कि नीतीश कुमार दोबारा सीएम बने, आपकी सरकार बन रही है, ऐसा ये पोल सजेस्ट कर रहा है। लेकिन आप ही के कई वोटर ऐसे हैं जो नहीं चाहते कि नीतीश कुमार दोबारा सीएम बने। 1/3 of the voters actually want a new leader to be CM.
और माननीय पार्टी के राष्ट्रीय अध्यक्ष ने और माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने मिलकर के यह निर्णय लिया है कि हम यह पूरा चुनाव नीतीश कुमार जी के नेतृत्व में लड़ेंगे। और नीतीश कुमार जी 15 वर्षों में अच्छा काम किए हैं और राष्ट्रीय नेतृत्व के निर्णय के साथ भारतीय जनता पार्टी के सभी कार्यकर्ता रहते हैं और सभी जो राष्ट्रीय नेतृत्व का निर्णय होता है उसका पालन करते हैं और नीतीश कुमार जी ही हमारे मुख्यमंत्री
लेकिन जायसवाल जी,
कोई कंफ्यूजन नहीं।
जायसवाल जी, अगर नंबर ऐसे आते हैं कि बीजेपी में सबको सबसे ज्यादा नंबर मिलते हैं, आप 111 सीट लड़ रहे हैं, समझ लीजिए आपको 70-80 सीट आते हैं, नीतीश कुमार को 50 सीट आते हैं या 45 सीट आते हैं, क्या उस स्थिति में भी नीतीश कुमार जी ही रहेंगे या एक साल बाद आप बदलाव चाहेंगे, या कहीं डर है कि महाराष्ट्र की तरह नीतीश कुमार कहीं दूसरी तरफ ना जाए अगर आप उनको एक तरह से किनारे कर दे?
भारतीय जनता पार्टी का प्रत्येक कार्यकर्ता अपने राष्ट्रीय नेतृत्व का आदेश मानता है और जब राष्ट्रीय नेतृत्व ने यह तय कर दिया कि नीतीश कुमार हमारे मुख्यमंत्री हैं तो आप विश्वास करिए कि हर
खुशी से मान रहा है जायसवाल जी, सॉरी,
पार्टी पूरी शक्ति से लगेगी।
जायसवाल जी खुशी से मान रहा है या कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है इसलिए मान रहा है?
नहीं, खुशी से मान रहा है। भाजपा में सारे निर्णय सामूहिक होते हैं और जब एक बार पार्लियामेंट्री बोर्ड के द्वारा कोई सामूहिक निर्णय हो जाता है उसकी बात प्रत्येक कार्यकर्ता बूथ के स्तर पर मानता है और जो भी आज हमारे पार्लियामेंट्री बोर्ड के मेंबर्स हैं वह सब कभी बूथ स्तर के कार्यकर्ता रहे हैं। हमारे यहाँ कोई फैमिली ट्रेडिशन तो है नहीं कि किसी फैमिली के बेटे होने से कोई पहुंच जाए, तो नेचुरली ये सब कार्यकर्ता के रूप में थे और आज हमारे पार्लियामेंट्री बोर्ड में हमारे राष्ट्रीय अध्यक्ष हैं, हमारे प्रधानमंत्री हैं, हमारे गृह मंत्री हैं, तो उन सबों ने यह निर्णय किया है। तो भाजपा, आपका जो भी आकलन हो, मैं भाजपा प्रदेश अध्यक्ष के नाते पूरी गंभीरता से इस बात को कह रहा हूं कि जदयू का प्रत्येक कैंडिडेट को जिताना भारतीय जनता पार्टी की जिम्मेवारी बनती है और जदयू के सभी कैंडिडेट्स भाजपा के समर्थन और जदयू के समर्थन से जीतेंगे। हमारा जो प्रोपोर्शन है अभी टिकट के वितरण का, वही प्रोपोर्शन रहेगा जीत का।
Thank you very much, Sanjay Jaiswal ji, for joining us. I think this issue will be key. We've seen though, Rajdeep, in places like Surat in Gujarat, where there was disaffection amongst BJP voters initially, and it kept coming up during the during ground reports and during opinion polls. But in the end, the point that Sanjay Jaiswal makes, that we're a disciplined party, they may crib, but in the end they'll vote for the BJP. The question is, can they fall in line? Will they fall in line? We've seen it happen in the past, and that's what the BJP is confident will happen again.
Let me end by throwing a bit of a googly, Rahul. If these numbers are there, it is clear no single party is getting a majority.
But that's impossible.
It's
no
not possible. Agreed. Yeah. Except for RJD, no one would be in position given the seats. This is the season of the IPL. And the IPL has been in this season dominated by super overs. The small possibility exists that if it is fractured, you could have a super over, where everyone then decides post-poll where they are going. As per this poll, that doesn't seem likely.
No, but LJP between 2 and 6, super over also requires a tie.
That's right. So if other parties get more than what we are anticipating, but as of now, super over is a distant possibility like Maharashtra. To my mind, it clearly at the moment suggests momentum is with the BJP JDU. Undercurrent is anti-Nitish. I don't think that with these numbers we can rule that out, that there is an anti-incumbency, Look at the numbers of Nitish Kumar's personal popularity. They are low. A chief minister normally, Rahul, gets 60%
but
plus.
To be able to convert that undercurrent into a victory for the opposition, you need a strong opposition.
Absolutely right.
That's going out blazing on all cylinders, that's got a formidable chief ministerial face. you have to present an alternative to cash in on that anti-incumbency undercurrent.
And that last mile connectivity. The BJP with its last mile mobilization will have the edge. But as we've seen post 2019, don't rule out the opposition. Haryana was a good example. I think what this poll has done is only increase the excitement.
But that's the thing. What it does is that don't think that this is a done deal and the election's over. You will need to tune in to India Today for the best reportage from the ground. We've got the biggest team of reporters traversing the state of Bihar, capturing the pulse of the people of Bihar. Remember, this is coming in the middle of a pandemic. It's an election of a kind India hasn't seen earlier. In fact, the world hasn't seen earlier. So we'll be tracking this very, very closely. I want to thank all our guests for joining us. We want to thank the team at CSDS Lokniti for giving us this data, which we put out on India Today, and the work that they did in actually going out and in the middle of a pandemic, speaking to these people and bringing the results together.
The old jungle saying, in Mumbai's Dalal Street, you need a rising Sensex. In Bihar, you need politics to get Biharis going.
Bihar mein kya ba? Politics ba.
That's
Whether
right.
anything else happens or not, the politics
That's right.
is
So we look
exciting.
forward to that. This has been the battle for Bihar. Thanks for watching.